Stratagem 1. Adaptability. CAO presents the dagger. The air inside the Prime Minister's palace was thick with the scent of incense and impending death. It was the year 189, and the Han Dynasty flickered like a candle in a gale. Zhuge, a tyrant whose belly was as bloated as his ambition, lay reclined on his couch, his breath heavy and rhythmic. Beside him, the god of war Liu Bei stood like an immovable iron statue, his hand never straying far from the sky-piercer halberd. Enter Cao Cao. He moved with the grace of a panther, his face a mask of loyal servitude. Under his silken robes lay the 7-star precious dagger, a blade encrusted with gems and sharpened to a molecular edge. This was not a weapon, it was a verdict. "Menschde, why are you late?" Dongzhuo's voice rumbled from the depths of his throat. "My horse is lean and slow, Your Excellency," Cao Cao replied, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the cold marble. It was a calculated humility. Dongzhuo, pleased by this feigned devotion, ordered Liu Bei to go to the stables and pick a superior stallion from the western regions for Cao. The moment the ironclad footsteps of Liu Bei faded, the silence in the chamber became deafening. Cao Cao felt the cold weight of the dagger against his ribs. This was the precipice of history. Dongzhuo, exhausted by his own gluttony, turned his back to the room to rest. Cao Cao drew the blade. The gems on the hilt caught a stray beam of sunlight, flashing like the eyes of a predator. He lunged, but at that exact microsecond, the laws of fate intervened. Dongzhuo caught the reflection of the drawn steel in a bronze mirror. "Mengde, what are you doing?" the tyrant roared, spinning his massive frame with surprising speed. The air froze. Outside, Liu Bei was returning, the clatter of horse hooves echoing in the courtyard. If Cao Cao struck now and failed, his lineage would be erased from the earth. If he fled, he was a dead man walking. In that heartbeat, Cao Cao's brain, a machine of pure strategy, switched gears. He did not tremble. He did not falter. He dropped to his knees, holding the dagger aloft with both hands, his expression a masterpiece of innocence. "Your Excellency, I have sought this 7-star precious dagger for years. I humbly present it to you as a token of my eternal loyalty." Dongzhuo paused, his suspicion wavering against the brilliance of the blade. Liu Bei entered, and the tension dissipated into the cold air of the palace. Cao Cao had not just survived. He had turned a failed assassination into an act of supreme devotion. But as he stepped out of the palace, mounting the new horse, he knew the facade would only last for minutes. He struck the horse's flanks and vanished into the dust of the eastern gate. He was no longer a courtier. He was a revolutionary born from the ashes of a failed strike. In the brutal arena of global commerce and high-stakes geopolitics, adaptability is not merely a skill, but the primal instinct of the survivor. And our first monumental case study begins with the resurrection of Apple Inc. under Steve Jobs in 1997. Imagine a titan standing on the edge of a cliff, the mirror of reality, showing a company only 90 days from total liquidation, with cash reserves plummeting below the $1 billion mark, and annual net losses reaching a staggering $816 million, like Cao Cao facing Dongzhuo. Jobs returned to a boardroom filled with internal chaos and external predators like Microsoft and Dell, who were ready to devour the remaining market share. The pivot occurred at the 1997 Macworld Expo, when Jobs presented the dagger of peace to his arch-nemesis Bill Gates by securing a $150 million investment from Microsoft, which stunned the loyalists but bought the crucial time needed to stabilize the foundation. This was not a surrender, but a masterful display of adaptability, where he killed 70% of Apple's redundant product lines, slashing 350 products down to just 10 core gems like the iMac, shifting the entire corporate DNA from a scattered hardware firm to a focused design powerhouse. The financial metamorphosis was unprecedented as Apple's market capitalization climbed from a measly $3 billion in 1997 to a world-dominating $350 billion by the time of his passing in 2011, providing a definitive lesson that when the blade fails to strike the neck of the industry leader, one must pivot to offer the blade as a gift of partnership, to live another day moving from the boardroom to the war room. We examine our second case, the tactical masterpiece of Winston Churchill. During the Dunkirk evacuation of 1940, the German Blitzkrieg had trapped 330,000 Allied soldiers on a thin strip of French beach under the shadow of the Nazi war machine, which looked like the imminent assassination of the British Empire. The mirror of the English Channel reflected total defeat, and Churchill faced immense internal pressure from his own cabinet to negotiate a humiliating peace treaty with Hitler. However, like the agile mind of Churchill adapted the narrative from a catastrophic retreat to a miracle of deliverance, using the very failure to ignite the furnace of British industrial output before Dunkirk. The public morale was fractured, and the United States remained an isolationist bystander. But after the pivot, industrial output for fighter planes increased by 50% within months, and Churchill's approval rating soared to 80% as he presented the dagger of national resolve to the world. He reframed the strategic withdrawal not as a loss of land, but as the conservation of the soul of the army, which eventually led to the liberation of Europe. In 1945, the third case brings us into the digital age, where Netflix dismantled the empire of blockbuster video through sheer evolutionary speed in the year 2000. Netflix was a struggling startup losing millions, and Reed Hastings actually offered to sell his company to Blockbuster for $50 million, but the tyrant of the rental industry with 9,000 stores and $5 billion in revenue laughed at the offer. When the mirror of high-speed internet appeared, Blockbuster held onto its old blades of physical stores and late fees, while Netflix adapted instantly by cannibalizing its own DVD by mail business to invest in streaming technology. The financial contrast is chilling, as Blockbuster went from $5.9 billion in revenue in 2004 to total bankruptcy in 2010, while Netflix surged from a rejected $50 million valuation to a current market cap exceeding $280 billion. Netflix presented the dagger of convenience to the consumer, while the giant remained rigid and was decapitated by its own refusal to change. Adaptability is the supreme art of the fluid mind and the pinnacle of mastering the void, where Chow's survival was not a product of luck, but the manifestation of a soul that refused to be shackled by its own initial intentions. Most men die in the halls of their enemies because they cannot let go of the version of the world they prepared for in their training. When the bronze mirror revealed the drawn blade, the assassin version of Cao was already dead, and he became the gift giver in a single heartbeat, which teaches us that in the chaos of life, the mask is the most vital tool, and authenticity is often a luxury afforded only to the safe and the powerless. You must never be married to your strike, but be married to your survival. For water does not fight the rock, it flows around it. Yet it is the water that eventually wears the rock away. The distance between a traitor and a hero is often measured by the time it takes to kneel and pivot the situation when the path to victory is blocked. The modern leader must cultivate a strategic silence and a flexible ego, because if you are too rigid in your righteousness, you will be shattered by the shifting tyrants of reality. Do not see the failure of an initial plan as the end, but as the revelation of a new opportunity to present your dagger as a token of value rather than a weapon of destruction. True wisdom lies in knowing that everything in the universe is in a constant state of flux, and the only constant is change itself. Thus, the person who clings to a single identity is a person waiting for the axe to fall. Hide your light and nurture your obscurity until the moment of execution. But when the reflection betrays you, smile and offer the jewels on the hilt for the man who can smile at his own failure, is the man who will eventually rule the ruins. This stratagem guides us to look beyond the immediate sting of a thwarted plan and to see the grander chessboard where a tactical retreat or a humble surrender is merely the setup for a more devastating return. Be like the shadow that follows the shape, but never dictates it, and be like the mirror that reflects the light, but never consumes it. For in the end, the empire belongs to the one who can kneel today, so that they may stand tomorrow above all others. Stratagem 2. The golden cicada sheds its skin ink-black night, shrouded the Jiangdong camp at Liangdong, with only the cold moonlight illuminating the gaunt, starving faces of Sun Jian's soldiers. Yuan Shu's betrayal in severing the grain supplies had turned the tiger of Jiangdong into a beast trapped in an infernal nightmare. Suddenly, the blast of war horns tore through the silence as tens of thousands of Huaxiong's troops surged down like a ferocious flood, torches lighting the sky with a murderous glow that made the earth tremble. Sun Jian's army scattered like broken honeycombs, the clashing of blades blending with blood-curdling screams. Sun Jian, wearing his brilliant red headband, Shize, that shimmered under the moon, became the sole target of Huaxiong's relentless pursuit. Arrows whistled past his ears, his bow snapped, his horse stumbled, and death reached for the hero's throat. In that heartbeat between life and death, General Zhu Mao roared through the rain of arrows, "My lord, exchange your headgear with mine." Sun Jian handed over the red headband, the symbol of power and his own death warrant, to his subordinate and vanished into the darkness of the deep forest. Zhu Mao galloped like a madman, luring the entire enemy host after him. Cornered, Zhu Mao hung the red headband on a charred pillar of a ruined pavilion and hid. Seeing the red fabric fluttering in the wind, the enemy thought Sun Jian was making a last stand, surrounding the site and firing a barrage of arrows. By the time they realized it was a lifeless piece of wood, Sun Jian had escaped like a fish, returning to the vast ocean. Though Zhu Mao sacrificed his life under Huaxiong's cruel blade, he completed a shocking shedding of the skin, using the false to protect the true, and death to purchase the rebirth of an empire. In the brutal world of business and volatile geopolitics, the golden cicada sheds. Its skin is not merely an exit strategy, but the art of preserving the core to await a more powerful resurgence. And the first greatest case belongs to Andy Grove and Intel Corporation. In the 1980s, imagine Intel at that time as the king of the DRAM memory chip market, but the rise of Japanese competitors with lower prices and higher quality pushed Intel to the brink of collapse. The Financial Mirror showed profits plummeting from $198 million to less than $2 million in just a few short years, facing imminent death. Andy Grove executed a classic shedding of the skin. He decided to abandon the core business that had built Intel's name to concentrate all resources on the microprocessor. This was a reckless gamble because Intel hung the red headband of the DRAM sector for rivals to devour, while secretly evacuating the soul of the corporation to a completely new market. The result was that Intel did not disappear, but became the giant dominating the PC era, with a market capitalization soaring from a few $billion to over $500 billion during its peak. Proving that daring to discard the old shell is a prerequisite for giving birth to a new empire. Our second case takes us to Winston Churchill's strategy in the Dunkirk evacuation of 1940, where 330,000 Allied soldiers were cornered on French beaches under the guns of Nazi Germany. Churchill used the golden cicada sheds, its skin stratagem, by mobilizing thousands of civilian vessels to create a miraculous retreat under the cover of the Air Force, and missed. He left all heavy weapons and war vehicles on the beach like a hollow shell to deceive the Germans, leading them to believe the British Army was completely annihilated. But in reality, 300,000 of the most elite souls returned to the motherland to prepare for the great counterattack of 1945. Without this shedding of the skin, world history would have been changed forever. The third case is the transformation of IBM under Leo Gerstner in the early 1990s, when the big blue giant was dying because it clung to bulky mainframe computers. Gerstner executed a spectacular shedding of the skin by shifting focus from hardware manufacturing to software services and consulting. He left the personal computer business to Lenovo, an old shell for IBM, to be reborn as a new entity, more flexible and profitable than ever before. IBM's revenue subsequently soared, and the stock price recovered from record lows to all-time highs, showing that in every adversity, the winner is the one who knows how to leave the red headband of the past to preserve vital energy for the future. The golden cicada sheds its skin is the pinnacle of wisdom regarding letting go and rebirth, where the sage understands that truth lies not in the external shell, but in the internal soul. This stratagem teaches us that in the most perilous moments, when the opponent believes they have victory firmly in their hands, it is precisely the time we must execute the separation between reality and illusion. If you cling too tightly to reputation, to old successes, or to external symbols of power, you will be crushed along with that shell under the wheels of fate. True survival requires the courage to shed the glamorous but decayed outer layer, to walk in the darkness with a new, more flexible and sharper form. Sun Jian's red headband, or Intel's memory chip division, were necessary sacrifices to exchange for the eternal existence of the grand scheme. This philosophy guides us that nothing is permanent except change, and the master of the game is the one who always prepares an escape for their soul before the enemy can close the circle. Learn to turn fear into calmness and loss into a performance that enchants the enemy, because in the chessboard of human existence, the one who knows how to shed their skin at the right time is the one who will write the next glorious chapters of history. When everyone thinks they have ended, always keep for yourself a seed of rebirth hidden deep under the shell of temporary failure, for that is the true mastery of those who rule. Stratagem 3. Loot a burning house. The smoke billowing over Zhuge did not come from the torches of foreign invaders, but from the fire of greed and cowardice consuming Han Fu's heart. Zhuge, a fertile land with grain piled high as mountains and treasuries overflowing with gold, suddenly became a prime target among a pack of wolves when the anti-Dongzhuo alliance crumbled. Yuan Shao, a man of noble lineage but cunning ambition, stared at the territory of his neighbor with the eyes of a hungry hawk. He did not use blades to storm the walls. He used fear to fling open the gates. Yuan Shao secretly sent a letter to Gongsun Zan, the White Horse general, inviting him to attack Zhuge and split the land. As the thunderous hooves of the Yan army pressed against the borders, Han Fu trembled like a leaf in the gale. Precisely when the house was burning, Yuan Shao played the role of the savior, bringing his army to assist. Despite loyal advisors like Geng Shu and Min Chun, kneeling and pleading, warning of the tiger lurking at the door, Han Fu blindly handed over the seals of power. The blades of Yan Liang and Wen Chou swung at the city gates not to fight invaders, but to strike down the loyalists attempting to block the new master. Yuan Shao marched into Zhuge without spilling a drop of his own blood, turning Han Fu's kindness and weakness into ashes, establishing the foundation of his Hebei empire upon the ruins of a betrayed brotherhood. In the ruthless flow of market economies and geopolitical shifts, the stratagem of looting a burning house is regarded as the ultimate weapon of master predators who do not start the fire, but know how to turn their opponent's blaze into an opportunity for trillion-dollar acquisitions. And the first greatest case belongs to the legend Warren Buffett. During the 2008 global financial crisis, imagine the U.S. financial system at that time as a castle burning fiercely as giants like Lehman Brothers collapsed and investor confidence vanished like mist while the whole world fled in panic. Buffett calmly entered the eye of the storm. He did not extinguish the fire, but chose to loot the most valuable assets at bargain prices by injecting $5 billion into Goldman Sachs and $3 billion into General Electric. When these companies were on the brink of despair, the terms Buffett offered were extremely favorable to him, with a 10% dividend and warrants to buy stock at record low prices. This action not only saved those companies, but also brought Berkshire Hathaway a net profit of over $10 billion. Just a few years later, proving that when an opponent is in the midst of a liquidity shortage, the one holding cash is the master of the game. Our second case leads us to the hostile takeover battlefield of Wall Street, with Oracle's acquisition of PeopleSoft. In 2003, Larry Ellison exploited the drop in customer confidence and internal turmoil of PeopleSoft after their acquisition of J.D. Edwards. To launch an aggressive takeover bid, Ellison fanned the flames of doubt regarding PeopleSoft's future, causing their stock price to plummet and investors to turn away from the old management. Although PeopleSoft fought fiercely for 18 months, the internal weakening eventually forced them to surrender for $10.3 billion, helping Oracle eliminate a formidable rival and dominate the enterprise software sector. Comparative data showed Oracle's revenue surged 30% immediately after the deal, while operating costs decreased significantly by cutting the rival's redundant apparatus. The third case is Disney's strategy in acquiring 21st Century Fox in 2019 amidst Rupert Murdoch facing the rise of streaming platforms, which left Fox's traditional TV model in distress. Disney did not miss the chance when Fox was struggling to find a way out to offer $71 billion to acquire the entire massive content library, including Marvel and Star Wars. This was a century-defining loot of a burning house. Because Disney knew that if they did not sell, Fox would be crushed by Netflix and Amazon. This deal drove Disney's valuation to record levels and helped Disney Plus reach 100 million users faster than any service in history, showing that in business, the one who knows how to exploit an opponent's pain to expand their empire is the one who truly understands stratagem next. We look at evidence from the energy market when Russia acquired the oil and gas assets of fallen oligarchs. During periods of internal political instability or global oil price declines, state entities often proceed to buy struggling private companies at deep discount prices to consolidate state power over national resources. Data on Rosneft's oil production doubling after acquiring Yukos assets is a quantitative proof of the power of exploiting internal chaos. Additionally, in the digital era, the collapse of crypto banks like FTX also created a loot, a burning house opportunity for larger exchanges like Binance or Coinbase to attract massive user bases and dumped digital assets. Binance's valuation grew tremendously after competitors were incinerated by legal and financial scandals. Finally, we consider M&A deals in the retail industry when traditional chains went bankrupt due to e-commerce. Large corporations like Amazon bought prime real estate and logistics infrastructure at liquidation prices to build last-mile delivery systems, showing that the fire of obsolescence for one person is the gold forge for another survival and development. In this world is always based on identifying the loopholes and weaknesses of the opponent to launch a decisive strike to optimize benefits and consolidate a leading position. There is never mercy in the marketplace, only sober predators who know when an opponent's fire is large enough to begin their great harvest. Looting a burning house is the pinnacle of pragmatism and ruthless wisdom, where the strong understand that misplaced mercy is strategic suicide. This stratagem teaches us that in the universe of survival, there is no room for hesitation when opportunity arises. If you do not act to seize when the opponent is weakening, someone else will. And later, that person will return to destroy you. The opponent's fire may come from their subjectivity, from objective fluctuations, or from internal betrayal. But the mission of a grand achiever is to maintain a cool head, to analyze which is the most valuable piece of wood that can be brought back from those ashes. This philosophy guides us that success is built not only on self-strength, but also by absorbing energy from the collapse of others. Understand that every empire has a cycle of birth and death, and when a star is setting, that is exactly the time a new star must rise to replace it. Learn to look through the haze of chaos to see the core structure of value, and never let personal emotions blind you to the supreme interests of the collective. The one who knows how to loot a burning house is not an evil person, but one who clearly understands the laws of nature where the weak are eliminated to make room for the stronger, more flexible, and more decisive. Always be ready with resources to act at the exact moment. The fire erupts most fiercely, for that is the true mastery of those who hold the destiny of the world in their hands. Stratagem 4. Wait at leisure for the weary. The roar of flames and the terrifying silence of the yielding forests prepared for the most horrific massacre in the history of the Shu kingdom. Liu Bei, driven by the death of Guan Yu, let rage cloud his reason, leading an army of 700,000 to attack eastern Wu with the ferocity of tigers, vowing to crush the Sun family's domain. The Shu army, burning with murderous intent, traveled 1,000 miles, seizing passes and forcing their opponents into retreat. But facing them was not a hot-headed veteran, but a refined scholar named Lu Xun. Lu Xun executed the wait at leisure for the weary stratagem with ruthless precision. He ordered the Wu army to strictly avoid combat, locking the fortress gates and ignoring the Shu soldiers' insults and challenges under the scorching southern summer sun. The Shu troops, far from home, began to lose morale. Exhaustion seeped into their very bones as they set up consecutive camps along the forest edges to escape the heat. Liu Bei's 70-mile chain of camps was a soulless corpse waiting to be incinerated. Lu Xun observed silently, waiting until the Shu army's spirit hit rock bottom and their carelessness and fatigue peaked. Then, on a night of high winds, the fires of eastern Wu erupted, burning away all of Liu Bei's hopes. Only then did the Wu army strike with the power of beasts that had accumulated energy for months, wiping out 700,000 Shu soldiers in one fateful night. Liu Bei fled in humiliation, bitterly realizing that his enemy's silence was the sharpest blade that had severed his destiny. In the brutal arena of modern warfare and ruthless business competition, the stratagem of waiting at leisure for the weary is regarded as the supreme art of patience and resource management, where the winner is not the one who strikes first, but the one who maintains the longest endurance to deliver the decisive blow. And our first monumental case study belongs to the strategy of the Russian army against Napoleon's Grand Army in 1812. Imagine Napoleon at that time as an invincible military tyrant, leading a magnificent force of 600,000 men to invade Russia with the intent of ending the war in a single lightning strike. But General Kutuzov executed the wait at leisure for the weary stratagem. Thoroughly, he did not confront the enemy directly, but continuously retreated, implementing a scorched earth policy, drawing the French army deep into the vast territory of Russia, where the bone-chilling cold and the lack of supplies began to erode the enemy's strength day by day. Napoleon seized Moscow, but it was only a hollow shell with no inhabitants and no food when the French army was exhausted to the extreme and morale collapsed. Kutuzov finally began the counterattack and pursuit, leaving the Grand Army with fewer than 10,000 men when they crossed the Russian border. Statistics show that Kutuzov's patience destroyed 98% of the enemy's force without a single decisive battle, proving that the silence of the rear can suffocate all the glory of the front line. The second case brings us to the web browser war between Microsoft and Netscape in the 1990s. Netscape at that time was the pioneer, holding 90% of the market share and exerting all efforts to shape the internet world. But Bill Gates executed the wait at leisure for the weary stratagem sophisticatedly. Microsoft did not rush to launch a browser from the start, but quietly developed Internet Explorer integrated into Windows. They waited for Netscape to erode its own financial and human resources in exploring the market and educating users. When Netscape began to falter and face difficulties in maintaining a paid model, Microsoft then delivered the decisive blow by offering the browser completely free and leveraging a massive ecosystem to stifle the rival. As a result, Netscape's market share plummeted from 90% to less than 1%. Within a few years, leading to the collapse of a pioneering empire, Microsoft's software revenue subsequently surged by billions of dollars thanks to controlling the gateway to the internet, showing that the one who knows how to wait for the opportunity when the rival is exhausted is the one who truly masters the game. The third case is Toyota's strategy in entering the global electric vehicle market. While car manufacturers like Tesla or Chinese rivals were racing fiercely and burning billions of dollars to develop battery technology, as well as charging infrastructure, Toyota maintained a calm attitude. They did not rush to convert entirely to pure electric vehicles, but focused on the hybrid line to optimize profits and waited for the electric vehicle market to saturate itself and reveal weaknesses in costs and technology. When rivals began to face supply chain issues and declining profits, Toyota then began to push its electric vehicle roadmap with solid-state battery technologies that had been carefully researched in the shadows. Toyota's 2023 revenue reached record levels, while electric vehicle rivals had to cut prices and suffer heavy losses, serving as a quantitative proof of the power of waiting at leisure for the weary in long-term strategic management. Next, we look at evidence from the financial market, with short sellers like Michael Burry during the 2008 crisis. He waited patiently for 2 years, despite the artificial real estate bubble and the mockery of his colleagues. Burry maintained a wait at leisure for the weary mindset, waiting for the subprime mortgage bubble to burst under its own weight. As a result, he brought $700 million in profit for investors. When the entire financial system collapsed, additionally in the field of sports, the catenaccio counterattacking tactic of Italian football or Floyd Mayweather's boxing style is a perfect application of this stratagem. They actively gave the initiative to the opponent to attack, waiting for the rival to reveal gaps due to fatigue, then delivered the finishing blow. Mayweather, with a record of 50 wins, is proof of not needing to strike the most, but needing to strike at the most correct moment. Finally, we consider the rise of Chinese technology corporations like Huawei or Xiaomi. They patiently learned and accumulated technology in the shadows until Western giants began to stagnate due to bulky machinery, then launched highly competitive products in terms of price and features to dominate the global market. Survival in this world is not for the fastest, but for the one who knows how to preserve energy, best to explode at the decisive moment. Waiting at leisure for the weary is the pinnacle of stillness and the mastery of time, where the sage understands that the greatest strength lies not in momentary explosion, but in the persistence of will. This stratagem teaches us that in every confrontation, whoever lets emotions lead and whoever is impatient to finish quickly is the one who hands the blade to the opponent. The rival's weariness comes not only from the body, but also from the impatience in the mind. When you maintain absolute calmness, you are creating an invisible pressure that forces the opponent to make mistakes. The death of Liu Bei at Yiling or the collapse of Napoleon in Russia are blood-soaked lessons in underestimating the power of waiting. This philosophy guides us that success is a marathon, not a sprint. Learn to hide when necessary, accumulate internal strength in silence, and only strike when the time, place, and people are in harmony. The true mastery of a leader is knowing how to suppress the ego, not being drawn into the meaningless challenges of the opponent, to preserve vital energy for the final battle. Understand that sometimes taking a step back is not cowardice, but preparation for a greater leap forward. Be like a calm lake, hiding fierce underwater currents beneath. Because in the chessboard of human existence, the one who knows how to use their own leisure to deal with the weariness of others is the one who will smile last when all artificial glory has vanished. Stratagem 5. Loot a burning house. Thick smoke enveloped the capital of Cheongshan, but the most terrifying fire was not in the burning palaces. It lay in the utter chaos of the Han court following Dong Zhuo's death. Li Jue and Guo Si, the former henchmen of the tyrant Dong, were tearing each other apart, turning the capital into a horrific slaughterhouse. Emperor Xian of Han, the miserable puppet king, had to flee in a state of homelessness, with the roar of soldiers and neighing of horses in hot pursuit behind him. Precisely when the House of Han was burning fiercely, Cao Cao, then in Yanzhou with powerful troops and elite generals, saw a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. While other warlords hesitated, fearing the reputation of oppressing the Son of Heaven, Cao Cao launched a decisive strike. He led his massive army speedingly toward the west, not to extinguish the flames of turmoil, but to loot, to seize the most precious treasure amidst the ashes, the emperor. In the hazy wilderness, Cao Cao appeared as a savior, but carried the heart of a conqueror. He welcomed the king back to Xuchang, using the name of supporting the Han to command the world, turning the young king into the ultimate political pawn. The rebellious officials were eliminated, but real power fell entirely into the hands of the Cao family. Cao Cao's loot a burning house strategy turned the collapse of a dynasty into a launching pad for a new empire, proving that the ultimate winner is the one who dares to step into the fire to take the crown while everyone else is trembling for fear of burning their hands. In the brutal arena of global finance and crisis management, the stratagem of looting a burning house is regarded as the most ruthless yet effective tactic for restructuring power, and the first greatest case belongs to J.P. Morgan's acquisition of Bear Stearns in 2008. Imagine the context of the subprime financial crisis at that time as a horrific fire burning the confidence of the entire world banking system. Bear Stearns, a Wall Street giant, was burning fiercely as liquidity dried up and customers fled in a mass panic. During utter terror, instead of standing by Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan saw the greatest loot, a burning house opportunity in financial history. He coordinated with the U.S. Federal Reserve to make a bargain purchase offer of only $2 per share, while the previous book value was over $100. This was the looting blow in the middle of the fire when the rival had no choice but to surrender to survive. Statistics show that after this deal, J.P. Morgan expanded its asset scale to the trillion-dollar level and consolidated its position as the largest bank in the U.S., proving that in a crisis, the one with cash and decisiveness is the greatest harvester. The second case leads us to Samsung's strategy in the 1980s and 90s, when the world memory chip industry fell into oversupply, crises, and prices plummeted disastrously, leaving Japanese and U.S. rivals in distress, while the memory chip house was burning, and rivals cut investments to preserve capital. Samsung executed the loot a burning house stratagem. By investing counter-cyclically, they poured billions of dollars into research development and building next-generation factories. At the market's worst moment, this action eliminated weak rivals who could not stand the heat and helped Samsung rise to occupy over 40% of global market share, driving profits from the semiconductor sector to tens of billions of dollars annually. This is a testament to using the market's fire to incinerate rivals and being reborn in a dominant form. The third evidence is the illustrious acquisition by the LVMH Group under Bernard Arnault, when he took advantage of economic downturns or internal family crises of luxury brands like Dior or Tiffany to act. Arnault is nicknamed the Wolf in Cashmere because of his ability to read a fire from afar. He waits until these brands fall into administrative chaos or heavy debt to launch irresistible takeover bids. The $16 billion acquisition of Tiffany in the midst of a global pandemic was a typical loot, a burning house maneuver helping Arnaud become the world's richest man and driving LVMH's market cap beyond $500 billion, showing that in business, the one who knows how to exploit an opponent's confusion to capture precious gems is the one who truly masters the stratagem. Next, we look at evidence from the technology market with Google's acquisition of Android and YouTube. Exactly when these platforms were facing business model difficulties or horrific legal pressure, Google did not wait for the fire to go out, but jumped in to integrate them into its ecosystem, turning potential ashes into digital gold mines, bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. Additionally, in modern politics, the acquisitions of state enterprises in countries undergoing economic transition during hyperinflation or political instability are also manifestations of this stratagem. Interest groups take advantage of the decline in asset values to privatize at bargain prices, creating new ultra-wealthy classes in a very short time. Finally, we consider vulture funds specializing in buying the debt of nations on the brink of bankruptcy. They wait until the fire of default erupts, causing bond prices to fall to junk levels before buying and using legal measures to enforce payment at original value. Bringing in profit margins of thousands of %, survival in this world has no room for pity. Only a cold analysis of opportunity and risk to execute decisive punches at the exact moment the opponent is weakest. Looting a burning house is the pinnacle of pragmatic decisiveness and ruthless wisdom, where the strong understand that the collapse of an old order is the fertilizer for a new dynasty. This stratagem teaches us that in the flow of human existence, the crisis of others is our golden opportunity. If we have the courage to step into the fire, mercy in these moments is often strategic suicide, because if you do not act, someone else will, and then you will face a new opponent, even stronger. The opponent's fire may come from internal mistakes or objective fluctuations, but the mission of a grand achiever is to maintain a cold heart, to analyze which core assets must be captured. This philosophy guides us that success is built not only on self-strength, but also by absorbing the essence of those who are losing ground. Learn to identify the signs of a burning house, that is when unity breaks, when confidence declines, and when leadership loses direction. The mastery of a ruler is knowing how to strike exactly at the moment the opponent is busy dealing with fire and forgets to defend. Understand that sometimes helping someone in distress only brings temporary gratitude, but capturing them will bring eternal power. Be like a phantom appearing amidst smoke and fire, taking the treasure and disappearing before the ashes cool. Because in the chessboard of power, the one who knows how to exploit the misfortune of others to enrich themselves is the one who will write the next glorious chapters when the new order is established. Stratagem 6. Lure the tiger out of the mountain. The atmosphere in the capital of Chang'an was so stifling that a single spark could blow up the entire dynasty. Dongzhuo, the ferocious tiger reigning atop the mountain of power, was protected by an impenetrable claw, Liu Bei. As long as the father and son remained united, Dongzhuo was immortal. Wang Yun understood that to kill the tiger, one must first lure it out of its cave, and Dongzhuo's mountain was the trust and protection of Liu Bei. Diaochan appeared like a mystical mist, using beauty and tears as bait. On one hand, she vowed eternal love to Liu Bei at the Phoenix Pavilion, igniting a fire of jealousy that consumed the warrior's soul. On the other hand, she cooed beside Dongzhuo's pillow, turning Liu Bei from a loyal bodyguard into a potential enemy in the tyrant's eyes. The climax of the stratagem came when Wang Yun skillfully invited Dongzhuo into the palace for a celebratory banquet, isolating him from the constant protection of his vast army at the fortifications and separating him from Liu Bei's vigilant guard through slanderous whispers. The tiger, Dongzhuo, overconfident in his prestige, left the mountain cave of his fortified manor to walk into a celestial snare. When Liu Bei swung his halberd through his foster father's throat right before the palace gates, it was not just the death of a tyrant, but the collapse of a predator stripped of its safest sanctuary. Luring the tiger out of the mountain turned an invincible alliance into two warring fragments, proving that no matter how strong, once separated from their foundation, even the most wicked villain is merely prey waiting on the operating table. In the brutal arena of modern commerce and trillion-dollar power struggles, the stratagem of luring the tiger out of the mountain is regarded as the art of strategic isolation, where the hunter does not attack the fortress directly, but finds ways to draw the opponent out of their safety zone to destroy them. And the first greatest case belongs to Microsoft's strategy in destroying Netscape. In the 1990s, imagine Netscape at that time as the ferocious tiger dominating 90% of the web browser market. Their fortress was their independence and superior features that made users willing to pay. Bill Gates understood that attacking the Netscape software directly would be difficult to win because the rival was too deeply rooted. He executed the lure the tiger out of the mountain stratagem by integrating Internet Explorer for free into the Windows operating system. This was a blow to lure users away from the Netscape mountain to the free land of Windows. Once the users left Netscape's fortress became a hollow shell with no revenue from license sales. Financial data shows Netscape's revenue plummeted from hundreds of millions of dollars to a flat zero, leading to them having to sell themselves to AOL at a bargain price and eventually disappearing completely. This is a testament to stripping away the financial foundation to destroy a technology giant. Our second case leads us to Disney's strategy in acquiring Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm. Instead of confronting these cultural icons, Disney used the bait of massive financial resources and a global distribution system to lure founders like Kevin Feige or George Lucas away from their independent mountain peaks. When these tigers entered the Disney ecosystem, they were separated from absolute control over their spiritual children to become part of the Mickey Mouse money-making machine. Data shows profits from these brands grew by thousands of %, bringing Disney tens of billions of dollars in revenue annually. But the price paid was the loss of the original independent identity of these studios. Disney succeeded in luring the tigers out of the mountain to domesticate them into tools for ultimate commercial purposes. The third evidence is the collapse of the BlackBerry empire before the rise of the iPhone. BlackBerry was once the tiger ruling the enterprise market with its physical keyboard and extremely high security system that was their safety mountain. Apple used the lure the tiger out of the mountain stratagem by creating a new definition of smartphones as entertainment and touch and swipe devices, luring individual customers away from clunky keyboard phones. When the consumer wave exploded, businesses were swept along, forced to leave the BlackBerry fortress to switch to iOS. Data shows BlackBerry's market share dropped from 20% to 0.1% in just 5 years, causing the company to almost go bankrupt and completely withdraw from the hardware sector. Apple succeeded in changing the rules of the game to lure the opponent out of their strength zone next. We look at evidence from hostile takeovers on Wall Street, where hedge funds often use rumors or shareholder pressure to force CEOs to leave their management positions or sell core business segments. When the CEO tiger is separated from the loyal management apparatus, the company becomes weak and easily torn apart by acquirers. Data from Verizon's acquisition of Yahoo is a prime example where high-level personnel instability caused Yahoo's value to drop from hundreds of billions of dollars to less than $5 billion. Additionally, in geopolitics, economic sanctions are often used as a lure. The tiger out of the mountain tool to isolate a nation from the global financial system, stripping away resources to maintain internal power. Forcing leaders to leave their hardline positions to negotiate data on GDP decline and hyperinflation in sanctioned nations is quantitative proof of the power of strategic isolation. Finally, we consider how e-commerce platforms like Amazon or Shopee use massive promotions to lure customers away from traditional stores. When these stores lose their customer flow, they go bankrupt due to high rent costs, creating conditions for e-commerce giants to monopolize the market's survival. In this world, always requires sharpness to avoid being lured away from one's strengths, and at the same time, knowing how to create baits attractive enough to put the opponent in a weak position. The final winner is the one who masters the strategic space and knows how to strip away the opponent's foundation at the most decisive moment. Luring the tiger out of the mountain is the pinnacle of sophistication and psychological manipulation, where the sage understands that the strength of an entity lies not only in itself, but also in the bond between it and its surroundings. This stratagem teaches us that in every confrontation, whoever is overconfident in their fortress and whoever refuses to take their eyes off old glories is the easiest to lure. With fresh baits, the isolation of an opponent comes not only from blocking resources, but also from disintegrating their trust and connection. When you strip away the tiger's mountain, you do not just strip away the territory, but you also strip away its will and instinct. The death of Dongzhuo or the collapse of BlackBerry are blood-soaked lessons in underestimating the power of changing strategic space. This philosophy guides us that success is protected not only by solidity, but also by flexibility. Learn to identify the baits trying to pull you out of your strength zone, and never let personal emotions like jealousy or greed blind you to flashy, disguised traps. The true mastery of a leader is knowing how to keep firm roots while still observing and adapting to the outside world without being swallowed by it. Understand that sometimes leaving the mountain is necessary to expand boundaries, but leaving as an active hunter is entirely different from being dragged away as a passive prey. Be like tree roots, clinging deep into the earth while the leaves still reach high for the wind, because in the chessboard of human existence, the one who knows how to protect their mountain while knowing how to lure the opponent out of their fortress is the one who will stand firm after all battles are concluded.